I'm thinking right now about what it would be like to die, actually. I was thinking in the last video, or talking in the last video about how atheist death is often described as just lying in the ground and rotting. And I'm not really satisfied with that as an explanation, or as an account of what it would be experientially like to go through that process. So I'm just thinking on about that. What I'm actually thinking of is what it would be the kind of ideal process if I had to choose what process, not the method of dying, but what the internal process of dying would be like and what it would feel like. And I think what I would like to happen is, the first thing I'd like to happen is that the pattern of activation that my biochemical and homeostatic processes are producing is kind of switched off, or is decoupled from any kind of functional integration with the rest of my brain activity. I think it's those things, the biochemical and homeostatic processes, which give a kind of stable core to one's sense of self. And I think if those things were decoupled somehow, then my sense of self would kind of decouple itself, and I would not have that intuitively obvious sense that there's a kind of real me inside here. The next thing I'd like to happen is that the interoceptive stuff, some other interoceptive stuff, more variable interoceptive stuff, switched off. Not switched off literally perhaps, but in terms of its coupling with my with the processes in which my identity is generated, my sense of being alive and awake is generated. So I think if those interoceptive processes were decoupled from that, those processes by which I can hear my own heartbeat, feel my own breathing, be aware of my own proprioception, those kind of things. If those things were decoupled, I think I'd start to get a sense that this thing that was me, and I wouldn't have that core identity any longer, this thing that was me was kind of drifting or expanding. I'm imagining it a little bit like how Jill Taylor describes her experience when she had a stroke. She gets this sense of a kind of feeling of an immensity. She's no longer confined in her body, she's distributed across space. I think that kind of experience would be happened if that decoupling took place. Once that had happened, I think I'd start to like getting the more exteroceptive sense of shutting down. If not shutting down literally, then decoupling from my sense of who I was. But probably in a particular order. I don't mind about things like taste and being able to smell shutting down. Let's say they went next. And then probably my sense of touch. But when I say it's shutting down, I don't mean that I suddenly just go numb. I mean that it's almost as if I'd never touched anything. And the sense of the boundaries of my skin, which touching represents, have just kind of been erased. And that whole inside-outside thing, which the touching surface of the skin represents, is just elided. There's no distinction there. So not only do I not have a core-centered self, and not only am I feeling kind of immense and distributed, but the feeling of a boundary between myself as an inside-outside phenomena just disappears. Then I would like my hearing to shut down. But again, I would quite like to be overwhelmed with silence at that point. But I don't think I mean silence in the sense of absence of sound. Not just the silence that you hear when everyone stops talking, or you turn the television off at the end of the night. Not that kind of silence. Or maybe beginning like that, but perhaps overcome by a more kind of profound forgetting of noise and forgetting of sound completely. So it just sound never was. And that would only leave sight. And now I'd like to have my sight to shut down. But I don't see that as a fade to black, and I don't see it as a fade to white. And I think those are these two most common ways that it's pictured in conventional death narratives. You either descend into the darkness or you merge with the light. I'm not really seeing it as either of those, really. I'm seeing this shutting down of the visual systems, which are coupled to my sense of who I am, as being one at a time, perhaps mirroring parts of the brain which, as I understand it, do deal with different aspects of vision. So, for example, the sense of motion might disappear. And there is a particular part of the brain, as I understand it, which deals with motion, and if that's damaged, actually, people can't detect motion. They see kind of stop frame animations of everything. So I'm imagining that shutting down first. So the kind of extension over time that characterises normal existence is radically altered at the very least, so that time kind of stands still, if you like, if I put it crudely, and you kind of enter that eternity of the static moment, and again that's decoupled from one sense of self. And then I'm imagining something like edges, because I think we have edge detection mechanisms in the brain as well. And if those are to go next, then the edges of the object that I'm seeing here, the edges of that tree, the edge of that telegraph pole, the edge of this field as it sort of crests down to the valley there, that would disappear. So I'd start to get a kind of merging and a unification of all the visual experience. Then after that, things like colours would go, particular shapes. Faces would have probably gone some time ago, actually. And all of these things would just shut down one by one. And again, as I say, it's not a fade to white or a fade to black, it's a forgetting of those, a disappearance of those. So by the time that the last one's shut down and you're effectively dead, you've entered into a space which is forgotten sight, forgotten hearing, forgotten all of those exteroceptive senses, forgotten the interoceptive senses, including the invisible and stable and persistent senses which mark our core. And that's how I imagine death, really. It's kind of the reversal of how I imagine those things accumulating with the birth process, actually. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing, it seems logical to me at least, that in terms of embryonic development, it's quite likely that you would need biochemical and homeostatic processes in place first, and then you would need, these increasingly more complex processes to do with things like heartbeat, to do with things like proprioception, to do with things like, ultimately breathing once you're actually out of the room, to do with hearing, and then vision in all its complexity kicking in last. So I see dying as a kind of replaying of that narrative from the inside out. I think the least way I'd like to die is to be hit repeatedly in the face with a spade. I don't think it's very likely, but I think if I had my choice of not dying in any particular way, I think I would choose not to die by being hit repeatedly in the face with a spade.